Hello everyone and welcome to the breenjoeshow. Today we are going through a tier list video for SOVL. I'm going to be posting quite a few guides on the game on the Steam discussion. I've been absolutely loving it. I believe I've beaten most of the campaigns on the hardest difficulty now and the campaign, and I'm getting ready to move over to multiplayer. So with that in mind, this tier list for the melee infantry is going to be based off of how well they perform in the campaign setting, taking into account their raw stats when you pick them, how well they operate within the army, special rules for both the army and for the unit, including what equipment they can buy and what gear they have available to them in the stores. So with that in mind, we're going to move a little slowly on our first one and then speed things up. Let's take a look at the Imperial Halberd, which is almost as baseline an infantry unit as you can get. They have 3 skill, 3 power, 3 defense, 1 attack, 1 wound, 7 discipline. They are also medium-sized units, humans being one of the medium-sized units. Something like a goblin on the field will be a little bit smaller, which means they wield a little bit easier, and something like an orc brute being very large, meaning that they're harder to turn and position quickly. They also come in with a piece of equipment. Pretty normal, most units come with 1 piece of equipment, some come with 2. In this case, we have the halberd, which just means that enemies have to save on a 4+, or you know what I mean. So let's talk a little bit about the stats that I value the most and how they operate within the army. So first off, most important for almost every melee infantry unit is their attacks. The more attacks you have, the more likely you are to deal damage, the more likely you are to win combat, and the less likely you are to take wounds. So highly recommend going for units with high attack damage. Following that, we're looking at defense. Just because you're going to run into a lot of enemy units that have ranged capabilities, you want to be able to make those saves on a 2 or a 3 if possible, and that will eliminate a lot of the damage that happens to your units early in the campaign, which will stop you from earning money, which allows you to snowball a little bit better. Following that, I would also recommend speed. Most infantry, as I mentioned, move at a speed of 7. If they move slower than that, they either need a lot of ranged support in order to draw the enemy to you, or they're just going to get cut apart. So speed, very important. Following that, we're going to go with the number of units within the entity when it first spawns. Halberds come in at a healthy 10. I feel like that's a good number for most units, but there are some units that come in with more. Also, we're going to value special rules, such as the human's ability to gain extra valor, reroll attacks, those things. Skill, then strength, discipline, and finally any gears that they can unlock. So the halberds in C tier, it's a good unit. It holds the line pretty well. It has some upgrades that allow it to increase its defense, increase its valor, especially if you're playing with the captain. However, it doesn't perform as well as some of the other melee infantry units here. That's to be expected. Following that, we have the Imperial Spear. I actually rank the Imperial Spear a little bit higher than the halberds, almost the same base stats. However, they do have 1 extra defense, which is quite useful, especially when you can give them the extra valor upgrades, and the spears allow them to attack in 1 extra rank. It's quite easy to get a lot of these guys. They replenish very quickly. I should have mentioned that replenishment is very important for your units, so they can take a big beating and then get back up. I like that a lot. We also have the Imperial Sword. I don't rank the Imperial Sword as highly as I do the Imperial Spear, and not even as highly as I value the halberds, just because they have 1 extra defense, but they only get 1 extra charge bonus per attack. Not great. So that hand weapon is worse than the spears in a defensive army. And I tend to play the humans as fairly defensive. Following that, though, we have the Foot Knights, which I would actually rank a little bit higher than the Imperial Spear. They have a bit more defense, and they have an extra skill, which is fantastic. They have same power, but they do have the option to go with great weapons and re-roll their attacks. They also come in with 2 pieces of equipment, hand weapon and shield, and heavy armor. That's quite nice. Saves you a little bit of money in the later stages of the campaign when you'd be buying these 3 units heavy armor. Not a bad showing for the humans. They're all medium-sized, and they all move relatively at the same speed. The Foot Knights will be a little slower. Moving on to our next unit, we have the Northman Axe. Northman Axe is going to get a little bit higher of a ranking than some of these other units, or at least some of the other human units, because they are meant to take shots for your important guys. So very, very good at just getting hurt, which is exactly what you want in your Abyssal Legion army, because without it, your more important monsters and infantry will be getting shot. So definitely don't want that to happen. They basically have the same stat line as the Imperial Sword. Devil Spawn going up into A tier. So special rules for the Abyssal Legions allow you to earn extra wounds, which is very, very powerful in a melee-focused army. So I would highly recommend these two units as having more wounds. More attacks is good, but they don't have the best defense, so giving them some more wounds is great. They also have access to more attacks, more everything on their stat line, and pretty good special rules. We also have our Abyssal Warriors going into S tier, our first S tier. These are your melee mulchers. They do such a great job at just killing everything. 2 attacks, Abyssal armor. These guys come in with so many powerful upgrades. They can still get magic banners, which I would like to see a little bit something more from the Abyssal Legion special rules, having something like, I'm just going to make up a name here, Indomitable Conquest or something like that. You know, that could be really cool just to deal a bunch of damage. Great unit, absolutely love them, very, very powerful. Next up, we have our Humble Zombie. So the Dead Nations, let's talk about their special rules real quick. Reducing crumbling, more unit entities, and more revival. And the ability to restore more wounds at the end of combat. It's good, but you don't really want to be restoring wounds at the end of combat. You want to be making money. These guys don't really have many options to upgrade. They're not very good. You're going to be reviving them constantly. You need a lot of different units of zombies, not just one big block of zombies, because a big block of zombies can be easily surrounded or ignored. You want like 2 or 3 units of zombies, and even then, the Dead Nations tend to be more fast attack, and I don't really value the zombies very highly. I'm going to place both the Skeleton Spear and the Skeleton Warriors in C tier. Warriors a little bit higher than the Skeleton Spear, but both behind the Imperial units. They just perform about as well as you think they should. You're really relying on your cavalry and your flying units within the Dead Nations in order to get damage done. Your heroes are quite powerful. These guys are just meant to hold the line, and they don't do it very well. They don't have great options. They don't have great special rules. Being able to move a bit quicker is fun, but meh. Strangely enough, I'm going to place the White Guard in B tier. White Guard actually have quite a bit of things going for them. They come in with 2 pieces of equipment, which is great. They're very slow, but that is somewhat mitigated by Dead Nation special rules. Being able to always make them move quicker until they enter combat is quite nice. So they can keep up with the rest of your army, and they're 4 power, 4 skill, 5 defense, 10 discipline. Not that it matters, but that's pretty good. This is where actually getting those reanimation upgrades is quite strong for the White Guard, and they hold up quite well with necromancers that can bring them back from the dead, or even some vampires later in the campaign can revive them. I guess all the spellcasters can revive them later in the campaign, but I've had quite good luck with White Guard. Another great thing about White Guard is that they're available to the entirety of, they're available to everybody. There's a special event that allows you to pick up a unit of White Guard. I won't spoil it for you if you haven't seen it before. But if you're playing a defensive army, suddenly having a very slow, tanky unit that is fearless in your defensive army is quite good. Moving on to the Deepwood Guardians. So they have access to elf special abilities, and they have access to forest spirits. Great option here for them. I'm actually going to place the Deepwood Guard in B tier. Good spear unit, high skill, high defense, able to take a lot of damage, surprisingly a lot of damage. It's mostly because of that skill that allows them to not get hit as often, and they can attack back quite often with their spears. Very, very good unit if you're playing a gun line. Not super great if you're playing forest spirits or monsters, but that archetype is quite weak right now in the Deepwood Guardian army. Deepwood Dancers, also going into A tier. These guys, you have to keep them safe for a good while in the campaign. But if you can pick them up a little bit earlier to either increase their unit size or their replenishment rate, these guys have a ton of attacks. They're very quick. Something that can increase their power is very, very useful, or something that saves them from missile shots. Their defense is quite low. They don't have access to that heavy armor. So this is your damage-dealing melee infantry unit along with the Devil Spawn. Very, very good. I might be tempted to actually place them in the top of B tier. Only reason for that is that they do suffer quite heavily in the defense, and they don't have access to helping them with that defense. So the top of B tier, that's a pretty good place to be. Dryads, I am placing in C tier. Probably above these guys. They do outperform the skeletons. They're just slow. They're big, they're slow, they have 2 wounds, very high defense, I'll give them that, but they are literally just a roadblock. They accomplish what they do as a roadblock quite well, but this is something that could be done by the Deepwood Guard, and I think the Deepwood Guard do it better. They're a little bit faster, they attack a little bit more often, and they're a little bit safer in general. So Dryads are kind of like a worse version of the Deepwood Guard. However, if you're playing with a Druid and they can replenish wounds, that's quite good. Dryads are quite good for that. Dwarf Miners going in, I don't know, B or C tier. I do like these guys. They're quite good. Let's take a look at their stats here real quick. Great weapon, sturdy, ambusher. 3 skill, 4 power, 4 defense. That 4 defense is really good. 8 discipline. They're slow. They're medium unit size. Oh, I'm going to put them right at the top of C tier. I think that they're quite good. They have access to explosive charges, which gives them a little bit of variety as a hybrid unit. It won't deal very many wounds, but it's something. I don't really value the ambusher very high in the dwarf army just because your units are slow, so these guys can often get outmaneuvered and pinned down. So that really hurts if they're too far away from your army, but top of C tier, pretty good. Dwarf Warriors, absolutely love these guys. S tier all the way. In my book, one of the best infantry units for their army. They're inexpensive, high defense, have access to some gun options within the campaign. Very high discipline. You can give them heavy armor to go up to 6 defense. That is incredible, given that they can get some guns, start shooting, and have very high defense. Great hybrid unit. Potentiality, can earn all of the regular magic banners. Love these guys. I use them almost always. In fact, I normally pick Dwarf Warriors over the other Dwarf Infantry. Speaking of which, let's grab our damage dealer, these Dwarf Berserkers. I don't pick them very much, but I have played against them many, many times. They're a very good unit. 3 skill, 4 power, 4 defense, 2 attacks, 1 wound, 8 discipline, and Frenzy. Frenzy is a great special ability. It allows you to re-roll attacks in the first turn of combat. Similar to the Imperial special rule that for their elite units that allows them to re-roll attacks always. But normally the dwarves don't need to do that. Because they already have a high power and power 4 and high defense, they can stick in the fight a lot longer. Very, very good unit. A little slow, but not too slow because they don't have heavy armor. But they can get heavy armor and it doesn't affect them. So absolutely love that. Deep Guard for the dwarves, also going into A tier. Great unit, normally has 2-up saves, can hold the line really, really well, has access to some special rules, same as all the other dwarves, but I'd recommend the ancestral random chance in order to give them plus more power and make them fearless. Fearless is pretty good in the dwarf roster if your units can take the hit. And the Deep Guard, not Deepwood, Deep Guard for the dwarves can take the hit. Dwarf Veterans, though, I don't value very highly. I'm actually going to put them right in the middle of B tier. Honestly, actually after the Northman Axe. The Axe just serve their purposes within the army much better. The Dwarf Veterans don't serve a concrete purpose in my mind right now. They have all of the same abilities as the Dwarf Warriors, plus Fearless, and they have an extra skill, but that Fearless can be their ruin. I don't know if it's just me, but sometimes I have very bad luck, and having units with Fearless just stay there and die, and then they roll again and they stay there and die is very hard to deal with. I like being able to toggle when my unit is Fearless. That's with this Ancestral ability here for these dwarves. I don't like not being able to do that. So if they're ever outclassed, they're probably just going to sit there and die. And that's not great. I'd much rather them run away. That way my units can come in and support them, do whatever needs to be done. Okay, unit. Elf Conclaves. So the Elf Spear units are a little bit better than most other Spear units just because they can attack in a 4th rank. You won't really ever get there. So I'm going to place them in B tier just because they're okay. They do have access to a much better unit, which we're going to get into right now, but that discipline for the elves is quite good. They don't really have much else going for them. They're just your bog standard elf unit. Swift is nice. All the elves have Swift for the Elf Conclaves. Means that they move a little bit faster. Our 3rd S tier unit, and this is probably going to go a little bit above the Dwarf Warriors, just because the Elf City Guard already has access to bows. Having hybrid units is great. In the first half or first third of the campaign, you won't really be fighting very many ranged enemies. Having having longbows, Swift, and Spear and Shield is incredible. These guys have 3 pieces of equipment: high defense, high skill, high discipline, medium sized, and they're fast. They have great access to all of the elf special rules. They get spears and bows, so they can hit more often with their bows, and their bows can have -1 to the saves. Fantastic. High skill already means that they're hitting on 3s and 2s or 2s and 3s. 3s and 4s sometimes, depending. So they're hitting very often. You just want to get a lot of these guys and really wang around with them. Following up, we have our Weapon Masters. Now, I would like to place the Weapon Masters right at the top of B tier behind the Deepwood Dancers, in my mind. The Elf Weapon Masters have pretty high defense, very high skill, very high power, and they come in with re-rolling attacks at all times. Problem is that they just seem to die very quickly, and they don't regenerate very quickly. They only can get up to defense 4 as of right now, to my knowledge, which means that they are cut apart by ranged units quite quickly. They're not as fast as the other elf units because their Swift is negated by heavy armor. They're very, very good. Great hammer if you had a good anvil going, but they don't work as an anvil as well, and the elves have access to a superb cavalry, decent artillery, but their ranged units kind of make up for it. So elf weapon masters aren't filling in that great of a role just yet. I'd like to see some type of special rule that the elves can get for greatswords, maybe allowing it to deal 2 wounds, or I don't know, something to give the greatswords a little bit more options. Right now, I'd rather take my spear units. Well, I wouldn't actually. I'd rather take the weapon masters over these elf spears. But if I had to flip a coin and I got the spears, I wouldn't be disappointed by it. So if that tells you anything, they'll definitely kill a spear. Well, they might not kill a spear unit. Kind of weird. Mongrel Pack, also going in D tier. For the Goatmen Raiders. Goatmen Raiders did see a little bit of a patch recently. They have Minotaurs and the Minotaur Chieftain. The Mongrel Pack is okay. It has Ambusher. I don't believe at the time of this recording it has access to a ranged attack, which I desperately think they need. Either short bows or javelins. I could be wrong about that. I'll take a look and post it on the screen if I was. But not great. They're out in front of your army. Your army, strangely, isn't as fast as you think it would be. So they tend to just get chewed alive. They do come back very quickly, but I don't value that very highly. Goatmen Warriors, going into B tier. In fact, I'm going to put them right about here. These guys actually hit like a truck. They're fairly quick. They have the shield for that defense. And they just perform surprisingly well. Now, the Goatmen also have access to the Gifts of Chaos, which means that they can get extra defense or attacks, which getting either of those is phenomenal, or extra wounds. That will skyrocket these armies quite heavily, but because it's a random chance, it's a 1 in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 chance. Not going to rely on that too highly. Ibex Warriors also going into D tier. You know, I'm going to move these guys out of D tier and put the Mongrel Pack in C tier. Ibex Warriors, kind of bad. They're slow. They have halberds, which I'd much rather than have great weapons. The great weapons would be significantly better, or even just a hand weapon and shield to get them that extra defense. That would be phenomenal, but as of right now, I don't really see a purpose in them. You're normally the aggressive unit. I think halberds are normally a defensive tool. You don't really need any help killing monsters because most of your important infantry has high melee power, has a good strength stat, so it is what it is. Power is great. So they're kind of meh. Goblins! Goblins are both going into A tier. Strange, I know, looking at the other bits of their roster, but the green skin special rules make these guys phenomenal. 1, they come back very quickly. 2, the number of attacks you get with goblins is insane. Even though an individual goblin is quite weak, they come in big units, and you can get a lot of them very, very quickly. They have a special rule called Goblin Greed, which allows them to get more money at the end of a combat, so you can just let these guys die off. Just keep clicking that money button and healing up. Oh, it's phenomenal. I'd actually rate the spears above the mob. I normally leave the spears to cover any war machines or cover my flanks, and because you can get a lot of them, they have some extra attacks, which can help even out combat. They can also reroll attacks in the flank. Love these guys. Orc Brutes. Not loving these guys. They're going into C tier. High C tier, though. Really high C tier. Not as high as my miners, but they do quite well. The Brutes are great. They have a little bit more defense, a little bit more attack than your average orcs. They're just slow. They're slow and they're fat, which means that they get shot a lot. You lose a lot of them. You don't heal them very often. Their replenishment rate is quite low. The orcs have a special rule that allows them to regenerate models a little bit quicker. So that can help. It does make them more viable. I still don't think they're at the top, especially when you can compare them to boys, which I am also placing in high B tier, I believe. Are they better than Foot Knights? No. Are they better than the Warriors? Probably. Yeah. I'm going to place them in high B tier. Reason for that is that they can just take a lot of damage. They can dish out a lot of damage. If you're playing the Greenskins as kind of like a combined arms, very similar to the Imperial Force, where you have ranged units, artillery, cav, monsters, and melee infantry, these guys just slot into that melee infantry medium tier unit extremely well. If you lose a combat, they'll run, but that's okay, because normally you have goblins to support them. They tend to come back, they just keep hitting, and honestly, the orcs do really well on the charge. So losing a combat and having your unit run away, only to return and charge again, is not bad. Good access to upgrades throughout the campaign as well. Heavy armor and things will help them quite a bit. Ratkin Conscripts going into A tier. These guys are surprisingly good. Just like the goblins, they come back very often. They flee and then come back, flee and then come back, which is not bad. They hold the line fairly well. Lots of attacks. Can get some decent upgrades. Nothing to really write home about. But in your Skaven army, Ratkin army, you want a unit that is just there to hold the line, and these guys do all right. Ratkin Skulkers. These guys don't mess around. I'm going to place them right above the Foot Knights in B tier. Well, actually right below the Foot Knights. The Foot Knights can re-roll their attacks more often. I like this quite a bit. They actually hit surprisingly hard with those double knives. They do replenish quite quickly, and if you layer your Ratkin army, you can get a lot of use out of this. It does mean that normally they die, but they replenish quite quickly, and if they're dying, that means you're getting more shooting, which means your shooting units can get the money, or your Ratkin conscripts can click that money button at the end of every battle. So they're not quite as good in my mind, but I do like the Skulkers. They're quite good. Our next C tier unit, we have the Ratkin Legionaries. I'm going to put them right in the middle of C tier. Halberds is good. They're defensive. They can do some stuff and things. They don't really perform as well as you would hope. They have good pieces of equipment. They come in with heavy armor. They're swift, so they can keep up with the rest of the army until the rest of the army gets heavy armor, and then, you know, it is what it is. They're okay. Skill 4 is not useful. It helps them survive a little bit more. They're your monster killers, unless you have monsters yourself or snipers, and your ranged units kind of outperform them. Don't really see a good use for them. It is what it is. Our next A tier, coming in right in the middle of A tier, we have Newt Braves. They're good. Javelins is amazing. I love these little guys. They're phenomenal. They're really fun. I might be biased. Lizardmen or reptilian kingdoms are one of my favorite armies. Hand weapon and shield, swift, great. Skill 3, power 2, defense 3. Those javelins really make a big difference. They have a bit of special rules that they can use, but honestly, the special rules are considerably better on monsters within the reptilian kingdoms. These guys perform well. They're fun units. They can just do stuff and things. It is all right. And finally, to finish us out, we have our Saurians. The Saurians are not very good. You need them, but really you're relying on your monsters, and because the Saurian warriors are pretty slow, it's hard to keep them up with your monsters. They're also fairly large, so wheeling with them is hard to do. I prefer to play a dinosaur or a monster-heavy army with newts and cavalry versus the Saurian warriors. Quick change, I moved the legionaries a little bit ahead, and I moved the newts down. But this is it. This is where I think the state of the game is right now for melee infantry. If you haven't already checked out the Steam discussion that I've just posted in the guides, that way you guys can let me know, or comment in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you all soon. Goodbye.